Bloodborne offers up one of the most frustrating, soul-destroying, but at the same time rewarding experiences on the PlayStation 4. Sharing many similarities with the likes of Dark Souls, the player is tasked with making their way through a dark and decayed gothic world. Inhabiting this world are a huge, varied amount of terrifying monsters that will stop at nothing to take you out and hinder your progress. Combat requires the player to think on their toes and react to the sometimes frantically paced attacks of the opposition on the fly. You have the ability to carry several weapons at any one time, which opens up all different types of possibilities and strategies when approaching enemies, but players who get cocky will in no time be put in their place. Bloodborne requires a serious amount of patience to understand the more intricate details of its combat system, but once everything clicks, it truly becomes an enriching experience. If the action ever gets too much, players can retreat to an area devoid of enemies known as the Hunter's Dream, which facilitates a lot of the basic functions of the experience, such as replenishing health, leveling up your character and upgrading weapons, to buying items and clothing, which all aid you out in the field. But there's a catch. Each time you travel to this area, every enemy you have slain is respawned into the world, making each time you travel coming with its own set of consequences. As mentioned, Bloodborne isn't for the faint of heart. It will push you to your absolute limits, but for every time you fail, a new lesson is learnt, ultimately pushing you to get better at slaying the many atrocities that await you in this terrifying world. Developed by the same team behind the likes of Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human introduces the player to a futuristic rendition of the city, in which human-like androids have become the norm throughout society and daily life. The game centers around the events of three main characters, each from different levels of this society, one being a police detective, another a domestic servant, and lastly a companion for a wealthy citizen. The narrative depicts the struggles they endure whilst trying to find their footing and place in the world, and the notion of what truly is human. From a gameplay perspective, the experience lends heavily from past games that Quantic Dreams have developed, with the journey taken on an almost movie-like quality and controller inputs being fairly simple and straightforward in nature to correspond with the on-screen action. But where Detroit differs from past exploits is the sheer amount of options open to the player within how any one scene can play out, depending on how much you have explored each area, and the information you have gathered truly determines the outcome of each encounter or situation. Because of this, Detroit Become Human provides some serious replayability, and with an added feature in which to see how people around the world handled the same decisions makes this aspect all the more engaging. Visually, Detroit Become Human is stunning. It creates a believable, beautiful, but at the same time haunting future that feels like a natural progression of today's society. This is Quantic Dream's best work to date. If you've yet to play it, now is the perfect time. Gravity Rush started life on the ill-fated PlayStation Vita and managed to captivate many players with its charismatic main character and out-of-this-world gameplay mechanics. It was only a matter of time until it hit the big screen and made the move to the home console space. First a remastered version of the first outing, shortly followed by a fully fledged sequel that manages to expand upon everything that made the original so memorable, but at the same time introduce some new aspects into the experience to make it stand out from what has been offered before. Players take up the role of a young girl, a witch who has the ability to affect gravity thanks to her trusty companion cat, Dusty. Now the manipulation of gravity is central to everything that makes up the experience, from traversing each environment to taking care of each enemy. It can at first appear quite jarring, but after some time with the game, it soon all becomes second nature. The main adventure is made up of several worlds, each with their own unique style and challenges. It's also a sizable journey as well, which will see you racking up quite a few hours as you make your way through everything the game has to offer. To top all of this off, Gravity Rush 2 possesses a wide array of customization options, allowing the player to tailor the main character to their specific style of play, may that be an extra focus upon the character's combat prowess, or the way in which you can make gravity work in her favour. If you've yet to try out the Gravity Rush series, the sequel is the perfect jumping on point and will provide you with an unforgettable journey set across a truly intoxicating world. The Yakuza series has spanned nearly 15 years, with several numbered releases as well as a few remakes to bring the older entries up to modern standards. The 6th entry feels like a culmination of everything that has been learned along the way. It is the first in the series to be built from the ground up for the current generation, and it truly shows. The level of detail in the world is incredible and goes a long way in helping portray the narrative and giving each environment a life and character previously not seen in the series. Yakuza 6, The Song of Life, still packs all of the variety and wackiness the series has come to be well known for. You'll find yourself singing your heart out in a karaoke minigame, or chatting up girls on the internet, and even finding time to get in some fights on a Virtua Fighter 5 cabinet at the nearest Sega arcade, to name a few. This level of freedom and sheer amount of activities to indulge in helps set Yakuza 6 apart from many of its contemporaries, and often invokes fond memories of the likes of Shenmue, the original Dreamcast. But the real star of the show has to be the over-the-top stylized combat that never manages to get old. The best thing about it being how simple it is to actually get to grips with, pulling off brutal attacks and taking down wave after wave of enemies. It's never felt better. Although having played the previous titles in the series would help those wanting to jump into this entry of the franchise, it's not something that will overly detract from what all in all is a highly enjoyable experience. After a somewhat troubling release, Gran Turismo Sport has ultimately grown into a competent iteration of the series that now packs in a generous amount of content, which is coupled with several ways in which to consume it through the inclusion of several modes that both cater to the single player experience as well as multiplayer. The highlight of this entry though is the Sport mode, which assigns the player a driver rating as well as a sportsmanship rating that is intricately tied to their performance during each race. It's just one of the incentives that the game throws at you to keep you coming back time and time again. Now, no racing game would be worth it if the fundamental draw of the genre was not in place, that draw being the gameplay. As most players will know, Gran Turismo has prided itself upon possessing one of the most realistic simulations of the sport for many years, and this entry is no exception. Each car has a unique weight and feel, lending the game a true level of realism, resulting in every time you jump into the seat of a vehicle becoming a new learning experience in order to ultimately understand the limits and intricacies of each machine. As you would expect, a wide choice of tracks are available in which to race these vehicles on, all offering a nice amount of diversity in both layout and location, with the crisp visuals bringing each to life and further pushing the notion of realism. To top all of this off, if you're lucky enough to own a PlayStation VR set, players can look forward to a special mode that takes advantage of the extra hardware, which enables one-on-one races and the ability to view cars in a sort of showroom mode. Even though it is a bit restrictive when it comes to its options, it's still a nice touch and a worthy addition for those who can utilize it. The original Shadow of the Colossus, released on the PlayStation 2, it holds a special place in many people's hearts due to the lasting impression it left. You take up the role of a young man intent on reviving his lost love, and in order to do so, you are tasked with taking out several gigantic beasts known as Colossi that roam the wilderness. Each of these Colossi are gigantic in appearance, and all present themselves in unique ways, resulting in each becoming a puzzle within themselves, questioning the player in how to actually take them down and ultimately fulfill your task. The amount of diversity is what makes them so compelling, with 16 in total, ranging from flying beasts to sand-dwelling monsters and towering giants. The only thing tying them together is the way in which you defeat them. Each colossi are marked with magic sigils that glow. These sigils are where the player must attack in order to take them down, but their location on each colossi is where traversal comes into play, resulting in figuring out each of their patterns and a way in which that can be exploited in order to get closer to them. The standout aspect of the remake of Shadow of the Colossus though has to be the way in which the visual experience has been improved. The remaster takes everything from the PS2 classic and updates it for the modern age. With it now presented in 4K and an option for 60 frames per second, this truly is one of the best ways to experience this classic. Uncharted 4 sees PlayStation icon Nathan Drake returning for one last ride whilst introducing some new characters that help flesh out Nathan's history and backstory, resulting in a narrative that manages to set itself apart from previous entries in the series in both tone and scale. This adventure sees the player taking up arms with Drake's estranged brother in the hopes of tracking down the treasure of the infamous pirate Henry Avery. This sees the pair and some returning characters travelling the globe to solve the mystery by exploring the several leads that have been provided to them. The action takes place from a third-person perspective with a focus upon traversal that sees Drake jumping across gaps, climbing towers, and even utilising a grappling hook for some spectacular moments. But this time around, a lot more emphasis has been put on allowing the player more freedoms as opposed to the previous outings in the series. Because of this, most maps are significantly larger, which opens the gameplay up to a much more stealth-orientated approach, which is a nice touch and a change of pace, which manages to switch things up and break the adventure up quite nicely. But the star of the show has to be the presentation. Uncharted 4 is a seriously good looking game. A clear level of passion has gone into each environment and character, and the way the gameplay and cutscenes transition seamlessly adds an extreme level of immersion to the proceedings, which only helps make Uncharted 4 a worthy send-off to one of PlayStation's most beloved characters. Developed by Insomniac Games and released in 2018, Marvel's SpiderMan offers the player the chance to step into the shoes of the hero inside what essentially is one of the finest open worlds ever created. As you would expect, nearly all of Spider-Man's abilities are present, which help the player to traverse the city freely by using webs to swing from building to building. This aspect alone lends the game a sort of freedom not felt in many open world games. There is seriously nothing better than just making it from one end of the map to the next. It's extremely fun. To add to this, a pretty robust combat system is in place that consists of 3 inputs, one being for physical based attacks, another for webs, and one finally for dodging. It's a simple setup that allows for quite a bit of experimentation thanks to the use of environmental elements such as being able to use manhole covers and various other objects as an advantage against enemies. But what really stands out is the focus mode, which is essentially a meter that builds up over time thanks to consecutive hits from the player. By building this focus, it's possible to deal out devastating attacks that can take down several enemies at once in a truly cinematic fashion, which seamlessly blends with the on-screen action, making for some spectacular battles throughout the game. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, this one's a no-brainer. God of War takes the series in an entirely new direction that instead chooses to focus upon a far more meaningful narrative, which leaves behind a lot of the grandeur from previous entries and introduces Kratos, now as a father, on a journey to scatter the ashes of his wife along with his son. It's not just the narrative change that is present though, as nearly every aspect of the experience has evolved right down to the basic gameplay, which now takes place from an over-the-shoulder perspective, with the combat system adapting to the new setup as well. Kratos now wields an axe known as the Leviathan, which is infused with magic and allows the player to take on enemies in many different ways, may that be through combo-based attacks, magic, or even just flat out throwing it at them. There's many options afforded to the player, and with it also being subject to upgrades through the use of special items known as runestones, it's easier than ever for you to cater the weapon to your specific style of play, which really comes into effect when tackling the many bosses that the game throws at you. Complementing the combat and making a return from previous outings is also the Rage mode. Known as Spartan Rage, the ability relies upon a meter that fills during combat. This ability unleashes powerful, bare-hand attacks that deal some truly devastating damage. If you've yet to give it a go, God of War seriously deserves a playthrough. It's an experience that will stay with you long after the credits have rolled, and one that should be in everyone's collection. Developed by Guerrilla Games, most commonly known for the first-person shooter series Killzone, comes an entirely new adventure that sees the player taking up the role of a young woman known as Aloy. Set in a post-apocalyptic world ruled by robotic creatures, Aloy sets out on a journey to unravel the many mysteries behind this strange place to ultimately find her place within it. Essentially an open-world action-adventure, the environment is an incredibly crafted space, with a diverse set of various locales such as jungles, deserts, and snowy mountaintops to explore. But the real standout feature has to be the combat, and the way in which the robotic enemies each pose their own unique threats. Many weapons are afforded to the player, from bows and arrows to makeshift machine guns, and even tripwires to even the odds against the machines. The main journey will last players quite some time, but the real meat and potatoes comes from the various side missions available throughout the experience, with each managing to feel meaningful and relevant to the proceedings. Progression is also handled very nicely through the use of skill points you receive upon reaching new levels, which lock out abilities for Aloy that can be unlocked through the course of the journey, allowing you to tailor the character to your liking, resulting in an experience that feels all the more personal. Unraveling the secrets of this devastated world is something that should not be passed up.